Welcome back to Authentically Peculiar with Marcia. I am so excited about this episode today because I get to talk about a part of my life's journey that was depicted not fully in the movie Straw, but it resonated with me as a single mother, as a person who would do everything under the sun to make sure her children were okay. And sometimes the odds just worked against it. I want to start out by saying there is this misguided idea that women are choosing to be single mothers uh, with various baby daddies. I only know of one source of women that are choosing single parenting, and those are usually the ones that are being artificially inseminated without a partner's help. That becomes a choice. And I praise that choice because it's what they want to do for themselves. For those of us who were engaged in relationships or what we thought were relationships, being intimate with others that led to us being pregnant, and none of us chose to be a single parent. I don't know a woman that would want that plight on their head to raise a child by themselves, to be completely responsible with the intentions of sleeping with someone, to trap them with a baby. Whew. To hear about those things, I remember I was told that I was trying to trap someone with a baby. They didn't have anything, nothing. They still don't have much of anything. What was the point of trapping someone? But let's get into the story Straw. In the opening of the movie, we saw Janiyah walking with what we presumed was a baby, leaving down the corridor of a hospital. As a single mom, the battle of having to take your children to the doctor, to be looked down upon because there's no spouse, to probably being impoverished and being thrown away as if you or your child had no value is already overwhelming in its own right. When you move throughout life as a single parent, you're shunned. You're shunned by churches, you're shunned by the community, and no one ever asks about your story. No one cares how you got to the place of being a single mom. Well, here, let me tell you a little bit about my story. Going into college at the University of Tennessee at Martin, prior to me leaving high school, there was a person who I guess found me attractive, knew that I was going to be coming to the university, and the plot began to pursue me. But I was naive in the manner of which I had not technically been pursued. I thought it was nice that an older guy wanted, to deal with me, but neither that, because I won't give him a lot of energy throughout this video. But neither way, we did what we did. I got pregnant. I got talked about. I had to leave school because my family didn't have a lot of money either. And so, even when the doctors were trying to force me to abort my child, I refused. So I left school and I went home and I walked the shun of shame of being pregnant and having to leave school. And it was okay. I mean, it was a life that I chose for me. Because I took those steps after becoming pregnant and did not want to abort, I had to carry the burden of making sure that this child came into this planet. Uh, and I had to provide for safety and for protection and to make sure that that male child could come up as strong as he possibly could with as much wisdom and knowledge that I could plant inside of him so that he could feel loved and he could feel protected. I recall making sure that I worked 12, 14 hours a day, giving him what he needed. And it still wasn't always enough because it was just me. And I was having to depend on my family members a whole lot to make sure that he was okay. And in depending on them, I missed out on some things because I relocated from Memphis, Tennessee to Georgia, leaving my baby behind so that I could try to establish a lifestyle for us here in Georgia. I returned home for them to take him to surgery to have his tonsils taken out, and it broke everything in me because I had to slide out of that hospital and leave my baby. But I quickly sent for him and my mom and my nephew to come to Georgia because being without my child was a whole empty part of who I was and I am. That sleeping in the bed with them, making sure that you're peeping at them overnight, making sure that they're okay. The dreams of what happens if something happens to my child. I'm solely responsible. In the movie, Janiyah knew that her baby had medical concerns and she was doing everything by the book to try to get them to help her child. And unfortunately, when you're in a space where you make just enough money to not be on any social services, but not enough money to function, you feel like you are doomed. That happened. When I met my second child's father, I shared immediately with him, listen, if we're going to be together, this needs to be long term. We need to be on agreement. I'm not looking for someone that's going in and out of my life. If I become pregnant, I don't want to ever be a single parent again, yada, yada, yada. My boundaries, my expectations were very clear. The problem is a lot of men don't think like that. They think yes, so that they could get what they want. And even with him, I was pursued by him while I was trying to buy a vehicle so that I would be more independent, going to and from work, not having to rely on other people, and the whole 9 yards. Growing up without a dad in the home was very impactful for me because I saw my mother work 2 and 3 jobs. My mother had to raise her children as single parents because my father was abusive. She couldn't raise her children in that environment. She had come from a family of abuse because her father was abusive. And she really worked hard to keep us from having to experience any of that. But I'm not mad at her for doing what she needed to do to take care of us as her children. I was angry at my father that he didn't show up in the way that he needed to, in the way that my grandfather told him that he should, because my mother struggled. That opened the door for things like molestation, that opened the door for things like rape, leading to teen pregnancy, abortion, all that kind of stuff. If you read any of my books, you already know that story. But in the book of straw, she recognized that there was a need, and losing her job was the epitome of the breaking of all that she could do to survive. I remember my first full year salary for the federal government. 2 children and myself lived off of $13,380. And I was told when I attempted to apply for food stamps that I made a few $100s more than poverty. So I just had to wing it and I had to make it. I didn't have people that could come and bring me groceries. I remember a time being a member of Mount Pleasant, what was it, church in Dorville, Georgia. I won't throw the name out there, but Mount Pleasant was my childhood church, so not that. Mount Zion Baptist Church in Doraville, Georgia. I remember being a very active church member. I remember being in a state of desperation where my lights were going to be turned off. I remember asking the church for assistance. And I remember the deacon coming to my house. And in his poor little feeble mind, he thought I was desperate enough for a couple $100 to sleep with an old geyser. I turned him away and thus the money, and found another way to pay my utilities so that my babies wouldn't be in the dark. That was a breaking point, because there are men who are out there that will attempt to take advantage of single mothers, especially in their state of desperation. In that moment, something rose in me that I had to fight. I had to decide that I would no longer be into a space of vulnerability. Janiyah didn't get that opportunity in the movie of Straw. She did everything she could. She met with a boss who was the egotistical male figure that a lot of us run into as single parents, that had no heart, that was selfish, that didn't represent a state of protection for her, which is why a lot of women, when they talk about women take on masculine energy, it is taken on because there is a need for protection when there are no male counterparts to protect no one in the community, not an uncle, not a brother, not a father, not a child's father. And you go throughout life trying to find ways to make it without having to ask for help. But when that ask comes, it's for desperation, not for yourself, but for your child or for your children. And a lot of people that have not had to live that journey don't fully understand. I know a lot of people get mad at Tyler Perry because of how he writes movies and he makes women out to be the heroine and men to be the violator. Well, for a lot of us, that is our truth. Would we love to see more movies where we know, because there are some good Black men that are taking care of their children, taking care of their wives, even if they aren't married, they're in their sons' and daughters' lives, they're present, they're accountable, they even show respect to the children's mom. So listen, this podcast is not to demean Black men at all, but it is to tell the story of what it's like to be a single mother, especially here in America. Why America? Because that's all I know. That's all I know. That's the journey that I know. Janiyah lived impoverished. She even ran into a female landlord who, again, lacked empathy, lacked support, lacked understanding. And unfortunately, as a single mom, I've had to deal with that in workplaces. I've had to deal with that on rental agencies. I remember when my child's father, my daughter's father, met someone else, which was fine. I'm cool with it. Go on about your life, take care of your kids. But what he did was waited while I was at work, went into my home, moved all of his stuff, went into what was supposed to be a joint bank account, which was really my account, cleaned it out, and left me destitute. I had already written the check for the rent that month. I had gone to Kroger and written a check for groceries that month. And when I called him to say, well, actually, he showed up at my job to give me the keys. He used my card to move his stuff out. Showed up at my job to say, I'm bringing you the keys here because I know that you won't act up if you're at your job. But I've moved out. I've taken the money out of the bank and I'm moving in with this person. I wasn't devastated that he was moving out. I wasn't devastated that he was moving on. I was devastated because I had to figure out a way to cover these checks that I had written when there was money in the bank. Destitute, destroyed. Asking for help, and it led to friends wanting to have sex with me for money. So I couldn't be a whore. Wasn't gonna be a whore. So I had to find other ways to pull money together. I had to go and sit in front of this landlord and plead my case and ask him not to do anything about the check that was going to bounce or eviction, and that I was getting paid in a week and a half and I would cover all the expenses and all that kind of stuff. And I did, but it put me on a roller coaster and a spiral of playing catch up, because a man's ego decided that his pleasure principle was needing to be fed. Was he wrong? Absolutely. But I didn't have the energy or the room or the time to be angry at him. I had to remember these little smiling faces. I had to feed these smiling faces. I had to utilize things like WIC to balance out meals so that my kids could eat. I went to bed many nights not eating. I didn't tell my family because they had made mockery of my work as well. They had made mockery of my situation as well. They weren't necessarily as supportive. Not that that I'm angry with them or anything of that nature. It was just a journey that I had to go on being a single parent. There was no help. I felt Janiyah in that movie. I felt the pain and the desperation as a single mother, trying to do it all, trying to make things happen, trying to get help and asking someone to see me and feel me and support. I felt the anguish of not knowing. I remember when my daughter was an infant, she was probably 2 weeks old, and a young lady that I had babysat her son because I had started keeping kids as a way to make money while I was still looking for jobs after moving to Georgia. And she asked if my son could go with them to a family reunion, and that it was going to be at this park. They were going to be gone from this time to this time. I was notorious for pinning a note to inside of my son's clothes to say what his name was, his date of birth, my name, phone number, and address. Notorious. Even when my mother would take my son back to Tennessee to visit, they would laugh at me because I would have that information pinned inside of his clothes, because I needed, there was no cell phone tracking. I needed to know that if something happened to my child, someone knew how to get in contact with me. Well, hours upon hours turned, and my baby was not back. I looked at my child's father. I said, you need to go to that park and get my baby back. Something ain't right. I feel it in my soul. Something ain't right. Something ain't right. It's in my soul. He went. They weren't at that park. He went to the lady's house. They weren't there. Cell phones, again, were not a very prominent feature. So he was beeping the phone number, no response. I was a mess because I could not find my baby. And I was doing everything in my body to stay calm, because all the part of Memphis, Tennessee that was ready to fight was up and enraged. When she finally showed up, I took everything I had inside of me not to hurt her. I checked my son out. I made sure that he was okay, that nothing had happened with him, that nobody had touched him, that all that kind of stuff. And I told her, I said, you find you another babysitter. Because anytime you need to check on your child, I'm always available near a phone. I make sure that you know what he needs, what he's needing, the whole 9 yards. You did not make one attempt to check in with me. And although I kept your child, I don't know how good you would have been with mine. And it took a long time before I allowed my children out of my sight. Part of that came from the unhealed trauma of me going through molestation, going through rape. Part of that came from not having a voice, being told to be quiet and children are to be seen and not heard. I felt Janiyah. I felt the one friend that said, here, girl, take this money. It's going to help you more than it helps me right now. Get your baby the medicine. I know what it felt like to drive up to a school, knowing that I had a balance due on lunch and trying to let my kids out and escape the embarrassment of not having the money. I felt Janiyah. I felt the pain of the stairs. I felt when putting my children in extracurricular activities. Shout out to Gresham Park Rattlers. They raised them through football and cheerleading. It was a really great experience, but I felt the pain of what it was like. How am I going to make this happen for them? How am I going to keep them from being disappointed and me not having enough money? Selling this, doing this, all this kind of stuff. How would I make that happen? And ironically, I did. The money, that $13,000 to $15,000 would carry, I would finagle, and I would rob Peter to pay Paul, but they were never hungry. I was hungry. They were never without clothes. Sometimes I didn't have clothes that would be appropriate, but we made it work. We made it work. And I felt Janiyah when she felt like everything was coming to a halt. Fast forward, I lost my vehicle through repossession. And it was a painstaking moment because I had already bought and paid for multiple cars, and I was doing everything that I could to hold on to the car. And as I think back to being taken advantage of for a car note by yet again another black male who could not present to protect me. But I pulled all the money together to pay the car note because he had graced me and he said, you got to have it here by this, this, and this. I went and dropped the money off and he refused to allow me to leave without having sex with him. I felt dirty, used, abused, but at that time I had my car. I could get my babies to and from practice. I could get to work and to the grocery store and things of that nature. And I'm going to stop right here for a moment and say this. Black men, you all are angry at black women for having masculine tendencies and showing up and being strong and presenting in a manner as to not need you. But a lot of us have been taken advantage by you. There was no source of protection. It was only whatever your pleasure principle needed for gratification in the moment. Stop doing that. Learn how to protect the black women in your community because we're going to always take care of you. We're going to always fight for you. We're going to always lift you up. To put women who are single parents in a situation to basically have to sell their children so things could keep flowing. You all are cruel and no different than the slave master. You need to change that ideology that our bodies belong to you and that we need to be submissive because you're a man. If that's the case, show up as a man. Show up in strength. Show up in protection. Show up in love. But before you can do that, you got to show up and love yourself. You have to have your own value because in order for you to devalue a woman, you don't have any value in yourself. So back to Janiyah and the movie Straw. As you go throughout life, and I got married. I was actually married twice. The first time I was married at that same church, Mount Zion. Everybody knew that this man was a crackhead. I felt the pressure of, go ahead and marry him. He's not going to be on drugs, da-da-da-da. To fast forward, I almost ended his life. He almost ended my life. Divorce. Keep going, speaking in different churches, doing so many different motivational things. Lost my car, started riding Marta to and from, met a person that was supposed to be the preacher. Oh, what the church did to my brain to make me think that I just had to have a man in my life is such a fallacy, because you can survive without a man in your life. You can survive without the grief that he may bring in his unhealed space. You can survive that. So I married this person and left my job at the IRS for 8 years because he wanted to be the man, but he couldn't provide water for a pot. In a desperation and losing and being evicted while married, how does that work? Having to use money from my stored retirement plan to get us somewhere to stay, to moving in with my abusive father and stepmother, to escaping all of that drama, to moving back into a place where we're supposed to be a family, where I worked at FedEx Ground, walking to and from for 5.5 miles to work, having to come home because he had not paid the gas bill to boiling water to take up the stairs because I was loading and unloading trucks while he was using me as an excuse to not go to work so that he could hang out with the pastors. Had a bishop that made him feel like he needed to have him there, but the bishop's house was running well. Mine wasn't. To the point where the landlord was an African lady and her husband. And although the property was hers, she was not allowed to talk to me about making arrangements for rent, because I thought this man of God had been using the money that I was giving him to pay rent, but he obviously was paying something somewhere else. He woke up one morning because he had intercepted the sheriff's notice about eviction and said, God told me I needed to go back to Atlanta and begin doing work in the church. And I said, so what about me and my children? You know, we're still going to be married and yada yada, woo woo. That joker wasn't gone 24 hours before the sheriffs came and said, we got to put you out. And that was my breaking. I fell on the floor and I cried. I couldn't see a way out. I had nowhere to go. I had given this man all of my money that was supposed to match with his money because he was pretending like he was going to work at FedEx and he wasn't. I'd given that man all the money. And there was just nothing else left. The sheriff's officer, shout out to Henry County Sheriff's officers, I can't recall their name, that was so long ago, who said, we'll give you 24 hours and we'll be back. I called my dad. I called my godbrother. And I said, yeah, I need help getting this stuff in storage. And I got about $100. And I can get a storage and I have to find somewhere to go and take my children. I'll have to get a hotel or I do whatever I needed to do. So we got everything out. And my dad looked at me for the first time in my life from a protective father figure and said, I'm sorry that you've had to go through this. But he couldn't offer any financial support, and that was fine. Having him there, having him to help me get everything out, having to explain to my children what was going on and save them the disgrace of our stuff being put out was more than enough that I needed at that time. But I was desperate. I had to find somewhere for my children to go. And because he was a pastor and all of that kind of stuff, I began trying to reach out to different people for some type of assistance to get somewhere. And I had the offer to stay with the family, and I thank God for them every day because we didn't have to be on the streets or anything like that, and we stayed with them for a few months, and I got things back up and moving. But I remember some churches reaching out to me to come and speak at their churches because I was a good offering raiser and that I needed to stop scarring the man of God's name because of how he left me and my children destitute. The one lesson that I learned from that situation is never deal with a man that's not dealing with his own child or children. Never deal with a man who has a tumultuous, jealous relationship with his mother. Never deal with a man that's unhealed and have addressed his own childhood demons. I learned those lessons, and that's kept me single for a long time because I run into those unhealed processes and situations of people not being present in their children's lives a lot, unfortunately. Fast forward, I continued working at FedEx, got a job at Delta Airlines, went back to the federal government, and to say the least, things began moving forward. But I kept running into those manipulative men who only wanted sex one way or the other. Father's not in the picture. My son's father was never in the picture. My daughter's father would sporadically show up. His last showing that was impactful for me was when my child was in the 8th grade, and she pointed out this beautiful dress for her 8th grade prom, and she happily called her father to say, I found my dress, and he kept saying, I'm going to get it, I'm going to get it, I'm going to get it. And I would call and say, well, when are you going to get the money to me so I can get the dress? I don't want it to be sold out, yada, yada, yada. And rest in peace, Skurlock. But he said, when you tell me that I can come back and hit it. I said, well, that'll be a never, so let me go and do what I need to do to get this money for my baby's dress. And I did that. So many times did I have to lower myself to begging, and occasionally, every now and then, sleeping with someone because of desperation. I felt Janiyah. I felt the desperation to make her child happy and to be present in their lives. I felt the pain that she went through when she didn't have answers and she just needed a little support. I felt Janiyah, who was disillusioned. My disillusion wasn't going into a bank and robbing it, it was considering suicide. My awakening was no one else could take care of my children the way that I could. So I quickly had to shed that thought and move back into fight mode to make it for my children so that they could have what they needed to have and they could have me as their support. I felt Janiyah's plea when being misunderstood, saying, I just want my $521. I'm not trying to rob no bank. This ain't really my gun. I felt Janiyah when she shot the robber. That was my desperation when my first husband was choking me out, strung out high on drugs, and I had to get a knife and begin swinging to get him off me. I felt Janiyah. What I didn't feel was her pain of loss of a child. And my heart broke because after all of the fight, she then faced psychosis. She tried to normalize her life after she lost her baby that night. But grief and psychosis met at a head. And people in the neighborhood saw her talking. She had her child. The world didn't. And they saw her. They saw her ushering her into the car and talking to the landlord about money. They saw her reach in her purse and give her last. Single mothers that are mothering will still find a way to help, even in the midst of people not seeing, not feeling, and not understanding. But that crossroad of grief and psychosis took Janiyah on a journey that I'm certain that a lot of mothers were very close to being at because of desperation, because of the tragedy of mounting pain, because of a lack of support, because of a lack of being seen or understood. I felt Janiyah. As the movie moved towards the end, I saw the beauty of women who understood her experience. And Teyana Taylor playing the officer, the detective, who showed humanism in order to engage in her for the brute force of men, especially white men, and even a black man, to not believe her, to not give Janiyah a chance or an opportunity, to not wanting to see the desperation that she was under. To Sherry Shepherd's character in the bank, who mistook things and then had to rectify the situation. To the teller in the bank, who was obviously selfish and scared. To the teller who attempted to remain calm and videoed and showed the world the truth about Janiyah. So many times people will degrade and dissect a single mother as if she's nothing, calling her horrid names, making her feel small. I felt Janiyah. I felt Janiyah when the detective and the bank manager chose to get her, chose to support her, chose to see her. I felt Janiyah. I felt what that pain is like when you struggle, not having a really strong support system, but really taking your last to help everybody else out. That movie showed the pain and the throes of single parenting, as well as grief and psychosis during loss, the breaking of the dam, that last straw. I would encourage the audience to be kind to others, because you don't know what that last straw could look like. You don't know the pain of what somebody has gone through to get to where they are in that right now moment. The desperation that it would take for her to not only kill the robber, but kill her boss, who had become a threat as well. She just needed her check. That's all she wanted. She just needed support. That's all she wanted. But in the end, she just needed her child. And the medical institution doesn't always hear Black mothers. They often think that, and they're actually taught in medical school, that Black people have higher level of tolerance, that if they are coming and bringing their child, they must be looking for some kind of handout or some kind of drugs and all those kind of things. It was a failure too. We've seen that. We know that. Statistically, it's all around us. But I would encourage you all, for those who have said, I'm not watching another Tyler Perry movie, this is one to watch. because it can open up your eyes to the process of what single mothers have gone through and how that journey looks. Now, I'm going to say this because I do want to acknowledge that there are a lot of single fathers who are going through some of the same things. So I'm not taking that away from you. But in this movie, it was depicted as a single mother, and I'm speaking on behalf of my journey as a single mother and what it was like to go from impoverished to, they say, upper middle class, but being at a place to where I can be there for my children and they don't have to go through some of the same sufferings that I've had to deal with in my life. So to the dads who knows that your child's mother is holding it down, go offer a voice of gratitude. Speak into her life. Show your children how to love her and to protect her. Even though y'all aren't together, it's okay. Some relationships just doesn't work out. But I am encouraging you to do that. I'm encouraging the community to begin to see single mothers not as a disadvantage, but as a superpower to keep going. And I'm encouraging single mothers, go to therapy. Some of us carry the pain of being a single mother. Some of us carry the pain of abandonment and rejection and disappointment. And our children suffer for that. Go to therapy. Find you a therapist that you can talk to that can understand where you're trying to be. You deserve more than what you've been getting, and I know it. So I'm sending all shouts and praises out to you. I'm praying for all single mothers who have had to battle to be seen. See yourself. Take care of yourself like you take care of those children. Put your oxygen mask on first so that you can continue breathing for your babies. Until the next episode of Authentically Peculiar with Marcia, thank you for continuously tuning in, making season 4 a great opportunity. I look forward to seeing you view this video, leave your comments, and then come back for the next episode of Authentically Peculiar with Marcia. Take good care.